Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Ad America TV. Hi, I'm Maya Trainer. I'm one of the e-guides here at Ad America, and we welcome our audience joining us online. We truly hope that you are doing well and staying safe amidst this outbreak. Well, anyway, for those of you who are first timers here, hi, welcome to Ad America TV for the first time. Ad America is the U.S. Embassy's American Center. Our mission is to provide a space for young generations of Indonesia to learn more about the United States. We have temporarily moved to a solely digital platform, so you can enjoy our program from the comfort of your own home and help flatten the curve of COVID-19. Don't forget to leave your questions in the comment box below, and our panelists will answer them later in this seminar. Now, on today's episode, we will be having a session titled Jazz, an Indonesian Encomium. A friendly reminder for all of you as continuation of our 10th anniversary celebration and a full month celebration of Earth Day, we are having a very special activities with giveaways this month. In this giveaway, we're giving out not 3, not 4, but 5 folding bikes. How exciting! So make sure to stay tuned till the end of this event to know how to participate. In the meantime, I will break the ice a little bit with our social media quiz. So our question of the day is, what city is considered to be the birthplace of jazz? Is it A, New York, B, New Jersey, C, New Orleans, or D, New Hampshire? I'll repeat the question one more time. Listen carefully. What city is considered to be the birthplace of jazz? Is it A, New York, B, New Jersey, C, New Orleans, or D, New Hampshire? You can participate this quiz through our social media comment section and stay tuned till the end of this event to find out if you got the answers right. And now, without further ado, please welcome our moderator for today, Bapak Agus Setiawan Basuni from Warta Jazz.
Hello everyone, selamat malam, good morning for my colleague in another side of the globe. Hope you are fine tonight, and of course it is a pleasure for me to be coming back after some time. To be precise, it's 1 year during the pandemic that we could collaborate with Ad America again and presenting something that really exciting. I do hope for everyone. Discussion with our friends from an expert from the United States of America. So allow me to introduce you our two beautiful speakers for tonight. The first is Mr. Atau Pak Otto Stuparitz. So he is an ethnographer, editor, musician, and also a PhD candidate at the University of California, Los Angeles, ethnomusicology program, focusing on history and contemporary performance of jazz in Indonesia. His research has included archival research in Indonesia, the Netherlands, and Chicago. And he has been attending many jazz festivals throughout the country, Indonesia, and also doing a performance project called Bluesukan with CIMAC Dialogue hand drummer Cucu Kurnia and the Bandung pianist Jason Limanjaya, which we may have a chance to see and hear it later on. He is currently working on a project about a 1960s booby chan, whom that we knew has been called as the Art Tatum from the East, recording at the historical Lekananta Recording Company in Solo, Central Java. In his dissertation, he investigates the history and contemporary practice of Indonesian jazz by analyzing the socio-political context of grassroots archives affecting the historiography of Indonesian jazz and curation of present-day festival. Everyone, Mr. Otto himself.
Thank you, Agus. It's so nice to see you. It's been so long, and yeah, it's great to be at America again. So I will.
Kabar baik?
Ya, kabar baik.
Okay.
Pagi-pagi. Ngopi dulu di sini.
Yeah, that will be nice to have some Indonesian coffee
Oh,
at your time. Yeah.
oh yeah,
All right.
definitely. Yeah.
We definitely gonna talk more about what you were doing later on, and the other speakers for tonight's session is Mr. Ari Giancaterino, who is a professional bassist, composer, educator, who has been also performing in Los Angeles area for about 10 years or so. He has received a master's degree in jazz bass performance from California Institute of the Arts and a bachelor degree in jazz studies, upright bass from the University of Southern California. He has a strong background in classical, jazz, funk, rock, and world music as well. His career in jazz music has included countless performances and recording sessions with the independent artists, as well as world-renowned jazz artists, including saxophonist Benny Moffitt of Herbie Hancock Headhunters, pianist Josh Nelson, guitarist Larry Coons, drummer Joe LaBarbera, composer and arranger Ron King, and saxophonist Steph Lehman. He has been performed regularly at many noteworthy venues and festivals across Los Angeles, the West Coast, and the U.S., including the Troubadour, the Hotel Cafe, and Roxy Theater, the Blue Whale Jazz Club, the Los Angeles County Museum of Arts, the Monterey Jazz Festival, the Rapinia Jazz Festival, and last but not least, at the Java Jazz Festival in Jakarta. So he has some experience engaging with the Indonesian jazz lovers and musicians as well. Currently, he teaches at the California Institute of Arts at the field of the music theory. So, hello, Ari. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Right. So, everyone, as we has been mentioned in the introduction, probably you have read that Indonesia somehow this side of the world has connection a lot with jazz. In fact, when I was organizing my Ramadan Jazz Festival, the former U.S. ambassador has been visiting the festival, and when we asked what do you remember about Indonesia, then he mentioned that the Ramadan Jazz Festival, because it is something that only happening in Indonesia, that being held in the mosque. And as you're probably aware, in just counting days, we are welcoming the Ramadan festivities, and hopefully the Ramadan Jazz Festival will be back very soon. Okay, let's back to the conversation for tonight, the jazz and Indonesian Encomium. As I briefly saying before, even though we are so far away, jazz somehow is, has been around, I would say, because back to 1970s, for example, jazz was considered as a pop music in Indonesia. But of course, over the years, just like in many other places around the world, it's like having its up and down. But one thing for sure that makes us different compared to any other countries, even say where the jazz was born in the state of America. Our jazz audience in Indonesia are relatively young. I would say in many festival or concerts or communities that has been rose and blossoming throughout the country, we're witnessing together with Otto, many jazz lovers are basically under 25 years old, some kind of that age, which is, I would say, it is one of the phenomena. But of course, not just that, the other phenomena is the youngest ever Grammy Award nominee for 3 consecutive years, Joy Alexander, who has been witnessed by Herbie Hancock at the Ad America a couple of years back, is coming from Indonesia, Bali, to be precise. And of course, there are many other interesting facts which we need to confirm with our two experts, whether jazz really has some influential things that coming from the United States of America. And we will discuss the connection and how that's going to be in the future, and how would that be meaning for us, the Indonesian jazz lovers and musicians, specifically for the younger generation. And we're also discussing about how jazz and education, in particular, because Indonesia is basically, as you probably are aware, that we are divided or segregated by many islands, and not every single city has the same infrastructure when we talk about education and access to information, things like that. Okay, without further ado, I would like to give a space and time for Mr. Otto to briefly explaining a little bit what he has been discovered, and and his views on the Indonesian jazz scene. Otto, time is yours.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Mas Agus. Yeah, yeah. As he was saying, for my research, I did maybe from 2016 to maybe just the beginning of 2020, or the end of 2019, where I was traveling around Indonesia, experiencing different kinds of research. So I'll go talk about the different kinds of research I did. So one of the kinds I did was research in archives, which is maybe not so known to many people about the archives in Indonesia. I also did more traditional ethnography, which is attending the festivals, meeting the musicians, interviewing people, asking people what they think about jazz, experiencing those many kinds of audiences that we were talking about, and going to the very different places where jazz is happening. And what I found was that there was a lot of it in a lot of different places. And so that was always exciting. And then the last thing I did for my research was play music, which maybe doesn't sound so novel, but sometimes people who do research on music don't play music. And so actually very early on, I found this one group called Semak Dialogue that I really enjoyed, and many of my community members I was talking to also really enjoyed them. And so when I saw them play, I was able to make a small project with the Kendang Sunda player, Giancaterino. So I'll share my presentation so we can kind of see some images, and I can kind of talk through those three parts of my research. So the first part is the archives. And so one archive that was a very influential on me is the Ars of Jazz Indonesia, which is kind of where a lot of this started for me. I was told about it, which was in my hometown of Chicago, but it's only one branch, and it has other connections throughout Indonesia. So a lot of my connections came through experiencing how these collections worked. And one of the main things I learned from the archive is that there was a lot of jazz in Indonesia, and there has been a lot of jazz in Indonesia. So we can kind of see from this picture, we have Bubi Chen, which is a pretty well-known name, but maybe people don't know the music as well. And that's a pretty common issue, is that maybe a lot of the names in Indonesia are known by the community, but maybe people don't know too many recordings, maybe only one recording. And if we know things about jazz musicians, is they take different solos, different takes. It's actually better to have more recordings so you can actually get an idea of the style, get an idea how people improvise. So in terms of access and education, I think for Indonesian musicians, I think getting a better idea about your own history in terms of jazz musicians, because there are a number of recordings that are labeled pop, but they have real good quality recording and solos and versions of songs. So oftentimes it's the last track is very, very instrumental and can be very jazz, and every so often there's a very good solo inside of pop songs, and then other recordings are just totally jazz. So there has been a lot of jazz earlier than is often thought. Usually it's thought of the 70s as starting, but there's actually a tradition that goes back further. Two other grassroots archives to know about is Ramanu Nusantara, which has a website that has a lot of the audio streaming. It's not everything, but it has a lot of audio that's digitized, and it's probably the most accessible. And another archive is Museum Music Indonesia, which is in Malang. Not as accessible in terms of online, but really good stuff if you ever have a chance to go. So I would encourage Indonesian musicians to take pilgrimages, visit all their websites, and contact people, and you can learn a lot about your own history. So I want to just bring up two quick examples. This is maybe one that people know about or maybe don't know about, but this is Harry Lim. This is something I learned about in RCIP Jazz Indonesia. He was in Java, in Batavia, in Jakarta, in the mid-1930s when he left to go to the Netherlands and to study. And there he met musician Coleman Hawkins, who was a very famous jazz saxophonist. And it's maybe not known that a lot of American musicians were touring Europe for extensive periods of time during that period, especially African-American musicians, because they were getting pretty good receptions in Europe. And so there were a lot of musicians having large tours in London, the Netherlands, Belgium to France, and other places. So Harry Lim was able to meet Coleman Hawkins pretty early on. He then went back to Indonesia, to Java, in 1936, and he brought back a large collection of recordings and magazines, and so this is one of the first large collections in Indonesia. And he started the Batavia Rhythm Club, which existed from 1937 to 38, and they had a magazine called Swing. And then he went back to the Netherlands in 1939, but then that's when the World Wars were starting, so then he soon left for New York. And he was able to become a producer, and we can kind of see him on the top right. He's there playing, looking down at Duke Ellington playing the piano. On the bottom left, he's standing there next to Billie Holiday. This is a magazine from Life magazine, so it's kind of the Javanese jive man. And at the bottom right, you see him over Jelly Roll Morton, and you can kind of see he was with a recording company called Keynote Recordings, and you can kind of see in the middle the different people he recorded: Count Basie, Coleman Hawkins, Earl Hines, Teddy Wilson, Lester Young. If you know your jazz history, you kind of know this is a bit of the Kansas City vibe in general, but overall, it's a very important contribution to not only Indonesians playing jazz, but also the jazz community in the world. So this is just something, it's a larger history, but there's a lot of minor things that we can learn about by doing research and learning about the history of jazz in Indonesia. I'll just kind of skip ahead, so talk about Bubi Chen. So again, many people know about Bubi Chen and his family. He recorded with the Indonesian All-Stars there on the top left with Tony Scott in the late 60s. And Bubi Chen is a really great player, akin to Art Tatum, kind of this classical meets bebop style. Excellent, and I basically want to mostly encourage people to research all of the recordings, because just like most jazz recordings, you need to listen to a lot. And it's not just one recording, but transcribe them. And we know this, but there's a lot there. And so these tools are finally coming out. All of these archives are less than a decade old in terms of public access. So it's a new tool that we now have. So from this, I just wanted to point out that Indonesia has a long tradition of popular music and jazz. So a lot of times popular music is thought of as always new, but actually Indonesia has always been on the cutting edge of these things, and it's always been a place where people have met, people have um, traveled through. It has this reputation, and it also has a tradition of these styles. So we finally have a little bit more access, and more Indonesian people do too. So the second part of my research, I traveled around to festivals in different parts of the country, and I just wanted to kind of show how there's been a really interesting blending of American lessons and American traditions and kind of reinterpretations with Indonesian flavors. And what that means is actually very different in each area, so I'm not going to try to define it all the way. But if anybody in the audience can tell me what song this is, you get a bonus point. So I'll just play a short clip. So this is at Jazz Gunung, which is at Bromo in East Java, with Jaduk and the Ring of Fire project. We probably know Jaduk unfortunately passed away last year, but this can be an example of some of the projects going on. So this is just a clip, and this is a sound check, so the sound isn't perfect, but it's just for the beginning of the sound check for the festival. And this group kind of, for me, embodies this Yogyakarta style of jazz, which is a very interesting place in my research in that they have some of the most active live communities going on, with many events that go on every week. This happens in other places, but the openness to many different styles kind of allows for a different quality. So I just find people playing out a lot more and really trying out different things. And so there was a little bit more openness in terms of range of styles. But then, which is, I think, the most interesting, it's actually counteracted with a very strong tradition of collectors, educators who are very strong in the American tradition. So there's a rootedness in bebop, kind of these kinds of aesthetics, real book playing, and kind of an educated international jazz, which leads to a very interesting blend in Yogyakarta, which I think comes out the best because they play live a lot. And so the live playing together really adds to the development of their own qualities. I just have to point out that at this festival, Didi Kempot played, and so you also have to kind of put in your mind that jazz in Indonesia does involve a lot of styles. And you may not know this about Didi Kempot, but he actually has his Bossa Nova Jawa style, which actually is kind of drawing on this Brazilian influence. So even though he's known in The Godfather of Broken Heart and these kinds of styles, there's actually the Brazilianness that's actually going on as well, which is also another way to do jazz. So there's a lot of different approaches. And for me, if it's based upon a certain way of knowing and claiming it, it's learning from tradition and then doing it yourself. And so Indonesians are very good about that. So I'll just bring up that one of the possibilities for Indonesia is that it can be a leader in global jazz. So global jazz is kind of a new term coming out that is kind of combining the ideas of the third stream jazz, which is classical music and jazz, kind of Gershwin onward from there, and kind of world music, but kind of bringing them together. And it's different than world jazz in that it's more about trying to blend things and trying to both learn from tradition and doing it yourself, but allowing the different roots and different traditions from throughout the world to kind of intersect. So there's been a pretty popular styles of Latin American jazz that's kind of drawing in this global jazz aesthetic. But I think there's a real possibility for Indonesia to become a leader of kind of an Asian jazz movement. And so I wanted to give more examples about kind of learning from international tradition education. This is the MLD4, a season 4 project, which I was pretty surprised about because in the past the project had been a little bit more pop oriented, but this last edition actually played very strong jazz musicians who were educated at very good schools and had very good chops. And it just kind of shows that there's a growing trend and taste for jazz that has a more international appeal, and is kind of also attracting the younger audience. So that was just kind of an exciting experience to kind of see this group actually be able to kind of blend international education that they've kind of had and more pop leaning aesthetics back and forth depending on their audiences. So this is one of the many festivals I was able to go with Warta Jazz. This is the Reog Jazz Ponorogo, which is in Ponorogo. And other festivals I was able to go was Maumere Jazz Fiesta, the Ramadan Jazz Festival. And so those are always exciting opportunities to experience different styles in different places, as well as kind of a regional and national community of jazz. And so this is Aditya Ong, which I really enjoy as a pianist, and they are from Solo and have been kind of blending a little bit in the Bubi Chen vein, and kind of drawing on this blending of gamelan aesthetics with a real bebop mentality. And they're playing with, in the middle, Jacob Jayasana, who is one of these up-and-coming younger jazz musicians who have been really exciting to see because there is a really powerful and well-versed younger generation interested in learning from their elders, but also doing it themselves. Another one I know from Bandung is Nadine Adriana, another really great pianist. And so it's really exciting to see a younger generation interested in jazz and learning it from the many different accessibility that they have today. So then this is the group that really got me inspired to come to Indonesia, Simak Dialogue. Unfortunately, the composer and pianist Riza Arshad died before I was able to meet him, but his student Srihar Agaraga filled in on piano. And the group has gone through a number of different formations, but this is what I saw at New York Jazz in 2018. And I was so excited by the group that I interviewed all of them, became friends with all of them. I'm a bassist myself, so I was always talking to the bassist Rudy, but I was able to do a project with the drummer Chutukurina. So that was done with some Bandung-based musicians. He's Bandung-based, and I did a lot of my research in Bandung. And the idea for this last part of my research was be able to perform together, because one of the very interesting things that Riza Arshad did in his compositions was actually learn the Kendang Sunda so that he could integrate those rhythms and those styles into his solos. And if you really listen to it, it's really there. So I will play you the example of, with my project Blusukan, we have a recording coming out, I think next month, which was recorded in Bandung about a year and a half ago now. So it's finally coming out. But we were inspired by this process of learning to play together. So if we could play that clip. is my screen still sharing?
Yes, Otto.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, then I can just do that. So, thank you. So yeah, I edited that ending just to have the more live right at the end, and so that recording is coming out in a month or so. And so that was just another part of the research to kind of learn how it is to play with Indonesian jazz musicians and how we can kind of learn to blend and learn from each other. And sometimes the only way to do that is by doing it. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Otto, for a nice presentation. Of course, it's a lovely music, as I also saw has been commented in social media, at least the one that I just saw here at the Instagram. And now we give a chance for Mr. Ari to explain a little bit what he has been encountered so far. So, Mr. Ari, time is yours.
Hi, I just want to say first off, thank you so much for having me, August and Otto. An amazing presentation. I've actually learned a lot about some things. I really love that Giant Steps. It was incredible, that version of it. I can't wait to hear it come out. So thank you so much for having me. I wanted to just talk a little bit about my own personal experience being a jazz musician, not only in LA, but also my experience going to Jakarta and playing in the Java Jazz Festival, and kind of what I saw there. And we'll go through some slides, and it's mainly going to be photos just of me performing. But I wanted to show you a little glimpse into the life of a jazz musician and what our performances look like, what the artistry of it looks like, what it might mean to be a solid jazz musician, or experienced in that way, and the process of learning this music. So without further ado, I am going to jump into our screen here. Let me just, I think here we are. Sorry about the picture being a little dark. So I just wanted to, can everyone see this? All right, great. So this is at the Java Jazz Festival. This was actually a jam session that happened outside of the Java Jazz Festival. I did play with the Ron King Big Band in the main event, but I wanted to show this because as we see on the right playing piano is Jeremy Monteiro. He's actually an astonishing Malaysian jazz pianist. And the reason I want to show this was a couple of things. First off, I want to talk about how in the jazz world, it's very common to play with people that you don't know. A lot of other genres of music, like for instance rock and maybe classical, you tend to grow with the musicians around you. So for instance, a lot, in order to prepare a song, you'll play with a lot of the same musicians. That's not always the case, of course. People play with each other from outside of their circles, but it's very common in jazz that I didn't know Jeremy or this gentleman here on the guitar. I still don't know him to this point, but we were able to perform a really nice song just because of our common shared knowledge of the jazz standards, of the real book standards, of what's sometimes called the Great American Songbook. Now, one thing that I found striking about the musicians of Java Jazz is their knowledge of this music. Though we're separated by thousands of miles, it's incredible that we have this shared knowledge and we're able to bring it together in this event, and we were able to perform for people. I also just wanted to talk a bit about the playing wise. Everybody was just incredible in the way that they played. Now, this is more of the professional musician side. A lot of these people were professionals, have come from all over the world, but a lot of them were from Indonesia. And I was really struck by that, by their experience and how much this music has translated into their own language and their own culture. As Otto also demonstrated with his presentation too, I think it's really prevalent there. Now I'm going to move on to the next slide. Excuse me real quick. I'll just quickly talk about this. This is some music that this is a performance that I did in Ravinia. I might skip through this pretty quickly, but it's in Chicago, Illinois. I just wanted to mention some of the festivals that take place in the United States as well. In the United States, we have a lot of festivals in many different states. And this is just a picture of me playing there. Chicago, I wanted to bring up because it's one of the many cities that actually fostered jazz and the jazz community. Otto mentioned the Kansas City band as well, and how they moved into Indonesia. I've heard a lot of stories of a lot of musicians from many cities going to Indonesia because it has become such a hub recently. And I think that the Java Jazz Festival has done a great job at bringing that, making that possible. But I think it was inevitable. Indonesia has a long history, I think, of being a trade city or trade country, and there's a lot of shared metropolitan culture. So when Otto said that Indonesia could be a new leader in the jazz movement, it's not surprising to me given its history. Usually in areas where there's a lot of commerce and a lot of trade, in big cities like Chicago, like New York, like Los Angeles, New Orleans, and all across the world, this is where we find jazz come up quite a bit. I'm going to skip ahead here. This is just, I want to talk about recording and my recording experience. This is me with some friends at Capitol Records a couple of years back before the actual pandemic hit. Capitol Records is in Los Angeles. It's a really beautiful recording studio, sets of recording studios. And just wanted to show that, having this recording potential in LA is a big part of the LA sound, right? We have all of these great studios out here, and I think that a lot of us kind of utilize that in our own way. So let me skip ahead. So this is myself as well as the Benny Maupin Band playing in the Blue Whale in Los Angeles. I actually wanted to go over a couple things regarding this picture. So a sad thing is the Blue Whale Jazz Club in Los Angeles was a very huge meeting place for a lot of jazz musicians. It was a bar and club, and it was where a lot of performances took place. Now, this brings me to the point that in the United States, with the COVID hitting so hard, the Blue Whale actually has been disbanded. The bar, they couldn't keep with upkeep, and unfortunately they just closed their doors. And I think that this is very telling of what's going on, where we need these live settings, and there's sometimes not the infrastructure for that to happen, right? And especially during COVID, that has gone away. But still, people are still meeting and still playing, even if they don't have these venues to play at. Recently, it has been much harder to do that in the United States because of obviously of COVID. It's been a difficult thing. But like I said, there's still that spirit there, right? And people will always want to meet up and always want to play and always want to create together. As we can see on the right here, this gentleman with the saxophone is Benny Maupin. He is an incredible saxophonist. He played with Herbie Hancock's Headhunters band, and among countless others. I can't name all of them because there's so many, but he is legendary in the jazz community. I had the distinct honor of working with him. And one thing I wanted to say about Benny is he is in many ways a mentor to me. He's a mentor in my musical progress and my musical knowledge, and has been since my work at Cal Arts. And I wanted to say that in a lot of this music, the mentor relationship is incredibly important for all of us as learning jazz musicians. It's not always necessary because we have recordings that you can learn from, But when you're listening to those recordings, you're still gaining that mentorship, right? Maybe it's not face to face. Maybe that person has passed away and no longer exists, but their music exists and still informs you, right? So if you are an aspiring jazz musician, doesn't matter where you're from, I highly encourage you to do two things. One, find a good mentor who knows this music and who you really respect and get along with, and see if you can learn more from them. Secondly, dive into the music itself through recordings. There's so much information there and so much tradition that you can really get a sense of what this music means and all the forms just by really immersing yourself in it. Let me see if I can move on to this next one. This is just this is kind of fun. This is also at another jazz club. These are just some friends of mine. We were playing at this other LA jazz club called Awino Vino. As you can see, it's called Jazz Underground. You can't see it because I'm blocking there. But I wanted to show this picture to kind of show you a usual setup for a jazz band, right? So we have the bass, which I play. It's my primary instrument, as well as Otto, drums, piano, and guitar. This is just a very common setup, and you see this all across LA. You'll find bands just like this, but you'll also find it basically everywhere that you go and see music. I wanted to mention that when I was in Indonesia, there were amazing bands and there were incredible personnel on the big stage. But what really struck me were the small bands that were just put together and they were playing the streets of not Jakarta, but the Java Jazz Festival. And they looked exactly like our bands. And what was really amazing about it was they were not only playing jazz songs, right? They were playing pop music, but in this sort of unique style. And something that struck me about that was there were a lot of electric bass players as opposed to upright bass players. And each of them were incredible players. I was really, really taken aback at how some of these young musicians were just really amazing players and amazing Indonesian players. And I think that the main takeaway that I got from this was pop music is very prevalent in Indonesia, but it's being changed in such a way or arranged in such a way that it fits within the jazz style. And I think it's an amazing trajectory. You know, jazz music wasn't always, jazz music always has been the pop music of America. You know, when it started, it was really the music that it was the street music of New Orleans, and then it grew into pop music and it informed all of pop music. So what I love about the Indonesian scene right now is you see bands like this that are getting back to the roots of that music. Let me skip ahead here. Just to kind of plug my own thing, this is actually my band that I work with. We have, as you can see, it's pretty diverse. Sarah Sithi is an amazing composer and instrumentalist and a friend of mine. And we have Will Kier, Zev Chernance, Luca Ferrara, myself. We had just been done recording our album. And I just also wanted to point out that something I noticed is that if you can get a band together to play regularly, it really helps in your growth as a musician. So I encourage anyone who is pursuing not only jazz, but just music, please just go out and play more. It's really just a fun thing to do. And I'm sure that with everything online now, you can find somebody who is willing to play and grow with you. Now, as far as the next part of this goes, why don't we just take a look maybe at my video? If you're interested, my album is entitled Fear Animated. The song that we're about to listen to is called Truce, and I've composed it myself, and you'll hear some solos, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. I would love to speak a little bit. Yeah. So thank you for listening to that. One thing I wanted to just say about it was that this music is heavily influenced by world music. My own personal education at Cal Arts, I actually took a lot of Indonesian gamelan music classes and worked with Pak Wentin. He is who is the guru of that music, of Indonesian gamelan music. And I also did African drums as well, and as well as Brazilian music and Afro-Cuban music. And I felt always that those world musics influenced my sound and influenced this particular album. And at this time, I was heavily into gamelan music. So even though my background is in jazz, I really tried to adopt some elements of this. I hope that came through in the music, but you can find maybe some more than others. But it is there, and I encourage you, if you're ever looking, if you're uninspired or writing yourself, go listen to other cultures' music. You'll really find a lot there. I certainly did in doing this album. So yeah, so thank you very much. That's all I really have to say, and I just really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much, Avi, for the nice presentation. Also, so refreshing music, which is somehow also sound like sonically familiar to my ear, and I do hope my peers as well in Indonesia who happen to watch the show. Yeah, it's a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas to talk, and of course, I just have to pick some because we have a very limited time to talk. Usually, it's an endless conversation with Otto during the festival throughout the day and nights. Okay, let's start with something like. It is interesting that you guys mentioned about the adopting and at the same time adapting, which is very relevant to our situation right now in the pandemic situation, which we still not see the lights in the tunnel, I would say, but somehow our our spirit is there. It is. It is just part of us that is always wanted to create something and want to communicate something, and at the same time try to blend or mix. I would say make it like a gado-gado. The terms, the mix of everything here and there, and kind of see and going through, and then um, as everyone says, let it flow, and see how the audience and the music itself resonates among the people. And as far as the concern about the sonic sound, I would like to ask both of you, judging from your experience before you visiting Indonesia and then you being here and experience things, what is your own perception before and after? First towards to the Indonesian jazz or Indonesian music in general. Maybe Ari for the first thoughts.
Yeah, I think that the main thing was that I had a background of understanding Indonesian classical music, let's say the gamelan. So I actually went in not knowing so much what to expect, which was refreshing because generally sometimes there are preconceived notions about, when you go to New York or when you go to LA, people have an idea of what that sound is. But the truth is things are always evolving whether or not you are aware of them, right? So especially in Indonesia, I was really struck with just how forward-thinking a lot of these musicians were. Sonically, I would say that it was very interesting. I think that the use of pop instrumentation and pop sound aesthetics was very heavy. And it was very nice because sometimes in America, it seems like we are, some jazz musicians try to get away from that because of an idea of what it means to be a jazz musician, which I don't always like because I think we should incorporate a lot of things. I very much felt that I was very happily surprised to hear that Indonesians were using these tools from everything they hear all around the world. And yeah, I just believe it was a very metropolitan place that had incredible potential for music and certainly demonstrated that. So I was very, very amazed, honestly.
What about you, Otto?
Yeah, so in a similar way to Ari, I studied gamelan as well, Balinese gamelan, and actually my first experience with Indonesian jazz live, I knew about recordings, but my first was at the Ubud Jazz Festival, which I was studying gamelan there, and I was like, I'll go to the festival. And I think to go back to what you were saying at the beginning, Agus, what really struck me actually was the audience, and that the audience was very into it. I think for the Ubud Festival, not a kind of more range of audiences of ages. The other audiences I've seen were younger, but in Ubud, just a lot more diverse than in the United States. Kind of as Ari was saying, for the Blue Whale is probably one of the only jazz clubs in LA that for me was like kind of more that younger audience and kind of newer stuff. Also notably, I saw Joey Alexander play there at the Blue Whale, so that's fun. It's one of the I've got to play there a couple times too. It's fun, but it's sad that it's gone. But but going to the different festivals, what's most exciting in the many different areas is that there was a very strong audience interested in jazz and coming out for jazz, and maybe don't know everything about jazz, but we're open to learn about it and open to experience it. I just feel like it was always really interesting to see how audiences in, let's say, like Jazz Gunung and Bromo reacted. I thought were a little bit different than Nayok Jazz. Were different than Java Jazz. So a lot of the audiences were different, but there were commonalities in their interest, and it was, I guess, what really surprised me is that they tended to like good musicianship, and that was actually prized, which doesn't always happen because sometimes people just kind of like the pop. But there are people who were talented in terms of the kind of American songbook tradition were also really appreciated and encouraged. And that's really nice to see, because then I think once you kind of learn that and master that, those musicians can start exploring even more. And I mean, it's something I see like Joey Alexander doing. Obviously, right, that's his bread and butter that he starts that way. But now I feel like he's starting to kind of add some more colors into his playing. And I'm really excited to see how his stuff develops. And yeah, there's plenty of examples. So I guess how dynamic the musicians were, but also that the audience tended to like it, and really be interested in going on the journey with the musicians. So, I mean, that's, yeah.
Right. And of course, not trying to basically differentiate of the festival, because obviously the purpose of the festival, as you already having an experience with, is a totally different meaning when it comes to the specific location, the artistical approach. And as far as you're concerned, judging from at least several festivals that you've been experiencing with, is there any particular styles that mostly us as the audience really like? And how is that, in addition to the sonically that we just discussed, connect with, say, what's so-called tradition, both in the regards of the jazz tradition, but at the same time is our own tradition, which is not necessarily gamelan, but say gamelan has started. Because of course, we do know that gamelan has West Java, Central Java, and Balinese gamelan as well.
Ari, yeah, go ahead.
Um, I'm trying to dissect a few things from the question, but one thing I would say is something that struck me was depending on the setting that of which we were playing. For instance, there were two main events, right? There was the main event of the festival itself, where there were big stages and lights and all of that. And there were also the smaller stages, for instance, the one that I showed you the picture of me and Jeremy Montero playing. And I think that depending on what setting you're talking about, the amount of response that we got from each setting, it influenced the music. So for instance, the smaller setting, I noticed much more lent itself to the traditional side of jazz with, with jazz, American standards and also improvisation, and really that feeling of what it was like to play in a club in America, just in this small setting stage. But when you got to the bigger stage, I noticed that the response for jazz that had more of that R&B influence was much more responsive. And I also think that even when, and also there were fusions of that, of course. For instance, Corey Henry came to perform at the small stage. And as we all know, I mean, he's just so incredible and has that R&B influence. But at the same time, it still had that small, what we call combo feel, right? That combo ensemble, small setting. So what struck me was just that in both cases, the Indonesian musicians really put an emphasis on performance. And it's something that some American jazz musicians, I think, we tend to overlook because we have such a heavy tradition with it. And we're trying to push forward this tradition. And there's a lot of things there. Sometimes we have to back up and remember that we are still performing. And even the old generation of musicians, people would go and it was very entertaining and exciting. And when I went to Indonesia and played on even that small stage, I felt the excitement from the audience, and that responded to the entire experience. And it's something I feel in the States all the time. I love the music scene here, but it was just really refreshing to see that on a world stage and amongst everyone.
Right. Otto, you want to add something?
Yeah, I kind of had a funny thought, and I was thinking that maybe one of the good things that Indonesian jazz musicians really excel at, actually, as we were kind of already saying before, but the idea of gado-gado and campuran, and kind of like the ability to play lots of different things. And maybe that sounds silly, but actually, right, if we think about where New Orleans comes from, we have the same metaphors, not only of it's also food, right? But it's the gumbo. And we have this gumbo. So actually this kind of mixing is actually like right on. And it's really what it's about, and about drawing on those influences. And, maybe you don't want your flavor so much of this, maybe a little bit more of that, but it's okay. Throw it in. It's a little bit a part of it. Make it your own. And so that's always been one of the amazing things for the jazz musicians in Indonesia, is because they can really draw on a lot of influences, and they can turn it on depending on the setting. So it's something I think that this gado-gado quality is actually something to encourage, actually.
Okay, so to move from that point of view, I was trying to propose the question is so what kind of jazz that you think mostly influence the Indonesian music and musicians from your own perspective, from what you hear? Is there any such I don't know whether we should call this jazz Indonesia or jazz in Indonesia sound that you discover?
I believe it's really is a difficult question because wherever you go, there are musicians who really have gained a lot from different things, right? I think that it's just like I said before, it was striking to me the use of pop elements in Indonesia, and I think that that's actually a great strength of of the sound of it, because it really does feel like it's bringing the jazz tradition into a modern setting, you know. And I will say that just really struck me. I think that there were a lot of incredible bebop players there that I heard, and bebop was very heavy there. Um, but yeah, like I said, I just think that it's really great because it seems like Indonesia is bringing things into the modern realm, and I think that's excellent. I'm really looking forward to see what that has to do with. Maybe Otto has more to say about this.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's a lot of times when I show international audiences, they're usually interested in, you know, what maybe the subgenre of ethno jazz, is that is the real Indonesian jazz. But in my experiences, that's only part of it. As I was kind of saying, that's only one quality of it, and I think it's that ability to play and know about bebop and also draw on this R&B influence, and kind of the way to put that into one set and have it actually make sense, and kind of draw the different audiences. And I think that's maybe why so many people are attracted to jazz in Indonesia, is that there is a little bit for everyone and the different qualities. Uh, and so, uh, yeah, it's each of those traditions in terms of musicians is pretty strong. They're all very good at them. So it's kind of the ability to, yeah, put it together. So to say that it's just one thing, but also that's, you know, that's jazz, right? Like to say jazz is just one thing. It's about continually moving on and continually going through your career. And so Indonesia has a unique way of putting those together.
Oh, very nice to put Otto on that thing. I know there are some questions that has been shown in Instagram. We're gonna come to that very soon. So you guys, if you have any question for both our speaker here, Otto and Ari, feel free to shout out in any social media that you are tuning on right now. Now I want to continue that it is very good that we are touch base about the basic important things, that learning the history, learning back to what has been done from our, you know, great musicians, maybe around 50s, at least the one that maybe 40s, the one that everyone could still access, like the late Nick Mamahit materials, for example, who did mixing up the Indonesian child or traditional songs, and you know, and of course, and then continuing with the Indonesian All Stars, and then Simak Dialogue, Krakatau, Mas Jaro Ferianto with his Tua Ethnica, and the list are, you know, they'll be long. But jump from that perspective, we learn the history, and then jump to whatever we are today, and listening to recent works of the Joy Alexander, for example, his song Bali, with a very nice put, you know, Balinese pictures and landscape, and together with the music somehow. It's also struck me with the question: is, shall we use the always have to use the traditional instruments in two regards, us as the ethno jazz, or it is more like the mentality that you use the this, I mean, whether you want to use the instrument or you just use the approach to your piano playing, which is, I think, has been done by Joy, by Hanuraga, by many other Indonesian musicians. Or is there any kind of distinctive lines that young musicians should do in order to, quote unquote, find their own identity or sound? What do you think, Ari and Otto?
Sorry to keep going first, Otto. So I heard a great quote once, and that was that you could play music using just a string. It's the intention that counts, right? So the whole concept that you need to have a certain set of instruments in order to perform jazz, I think is not particularly true. Obviously, there are some sonic things that might, for a first-time listener, uh, make them think of jazz, right? Such as bass, drums, piano, trumpet, all of those elements. But if we get down to what the heart of jazz is, and it being an improvised music, um, as well as having this context of African American influence and as well as the influence of America, uh, we can just see that it's really just the intention of what you bring to your art, right? Now, I feel I'm of the belief that really you can play this music with anything. I've heard incredible recordings from I can't name the musicians right now, but uh, all over the world, there's a musician who used what's called a dulcier, and it's a type of Eastern European instrument. And I was just blown away at the what this person could do on this instrument that is so unlike any other instrument that we see in the jazz context generally. Um, so I think it is important to think outside of the box when you're playing this music because it is about free expression and about your imagination. And really, your imagination knows no bounds when you're dealing with this kind of music. As far as the tradition goes, I do think that it's important to hear the vocabulary as it was back then. So even if you don't perform it on a certain instrument or in the same way, maybe you recontextualize it. I think it's always important to just be open to musics and to absorb as much as you can. Um, yeah, that's generally my thoughts on it. I don't know if Otto has something different.
Yeah, actually very similar to what Ari was saying, but I would also apply all those similar things to other styles as well. I think you can take those lessons that you learn from different traditions in Indonesia, Javanese gamelan, Balinese gamelan, Sudanese, uh, all the different traditions, and you don't have to play it on the original instrument. But just so you know, if you don't play it on the instrument, you might lose some sonic qualities, but that's not always a problem if you're just, as I was talking a little bit about Samak dialogue, and I would totally encourage listen to the Gong record. Uh, that is a really good example of learning about the Sudanese kendang and applying those lessons to piano. Does the piano playing sound like kendang? Kind of. Is it actually like drum? No. I mean, but it's a piano, right? So there's percussion qualities. So you can actually find similarities and then decide if it's the appropriate lesson. But what that requires is actually deep knowledge of both traditions. And so what I would encourage for people who are interested in these types of things is I don't think you have to necessarily use instruments, traditional instruments, but you really do have to study them and actually learn from them and then kind of apply the concepts because there's a lot of interesting concepts from the traditions that I think can influence jazz composition, influence jazz improvisation. And I think that's a little bit of this challenge of global jazz, of like how to do that. And it's a little bit, there's only, I think, 2 programs right now of doing this. So it's a little bit on the edge about what that really is, but it's kind of these qualities about learning the concepts from many traditions and not necessarily just trying to throw them all together and see what it sounds like.
All right.
So.
Okay, let's take the questions from the people who. Okay, first I would like to read Elsadia. So she has been asking, what was the first song or instrument that was popular in Indonesia? Because I just know instrument from Dave Coast. So she may mean the saxophone. And she continued that who was the first Indonesian singer or group that popularized jazz? So maybe Otto, you could answer that question.
So yeah, that's a really big question actually, because there's a lot of parts to it. So yeah, I mean, saxophone, even in the American tradition, actually comes later, right? So saxophone is actually, even though a lot of people relate saxophone as an iconic jazz instrument. It's actually kind of building on the clarinet tradition. And so for Indonesia, there's a lot of questions about, when do we want to say Indonesia started existing? And then we also want to say, like, what are we calling jazz? And early on, there's kind of a quality where people will describe their music as hot jazz, which is kind of getting more towards this influence of the New Orleans style on recording. And so even in New York and in Chicago, they would put recordings as hot jazz. And that was kind of an indicator of that certain tradition, if that's what you want to define it as. But in Indonesia, a lot of keroncong musicians were playing and kind of playing music from all over. And so a lot of the earliest examples are related to keroncong. So you have like Mr. Boot. There's a group in Semarang called Tinghua Jazz. And so these kinds of blending of traditions, and keroncong is a blend as well. So it kind of came together around that time, which is maybe the 1930s. So it's pretty early, but there's still a lot of questions about what jazz is, not just in Indonesia, but in the world, because even at that point, it's still like just becoming established as kind of what we kind of know about it today. And so I don't always know if the first is always the most important question, but I think sometimes it's better for me is why did it come and why did it stay? And why was it still relevant? Because a lot of things show up places, but for people to actually relate to it and find it meaningful, and that's the interesting thing for Indonesia, is that it did come and people really are attracted to jazz and have played it for a long time. So I hope that kind of starts answering that. I think some of those resources of the archives I talked about at the beginning is another place to kind of look for those answers and kind of start those questions.
Yeah, it's I as like Otto has mentioning, RC Jazz Indonesia is something that you could start to dig, and of course we also posted an articles about Harry Lim in our website in waterjazz.com. So you may start it from there and see, and just like Otto has mentioning, we need to put some certain parameter when we comes to any definition that we would like to discuss. Okay, continuing to the other question is from Brimsky00. So she's speaking, I don't know, is she or he, speaking about your works. This is so cool, Otto. Any plans to visit Indonesia after the pandemic, perhaps the jazz festival too?
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm very excited to return. I don't really know exactly when, but hopefully it's sooner than later. And they will. I think there's a pretty interesting conversation that I'm going to go to this week about kind of the what's happening with the jazz festivals in Indonesia. Their kind of discussion among festival organizers, and just a lot of questions about how to do it, and it's going on here as well in the United States about what events can be and these types of things. But yes, I will definitely be back, and I will definitely go to as many of the festivals as possible because they are a very, very fun place to experience music, have a good time, always a beautiful setting. Yeah, definitely wonderful to go. So I'm excited to come back, and yeah, so that's simple.
Okay, and then coming up, it's the from not sure whether this Alex forever. To speaker and moderator, how's the future of jazz festival after the pandemic? Will it get back to normal? How to incorporate the online culture to jazz festival? So perhaps Ari would like to respond to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, no one knows for sure what the trajectory of it will be exactly like. My feeling about it is that the future of music in general, as well as jazz, is going to be changed forever. I think that there will be some things that are changed are here to stay for a while. Particularly, I think we're going to see a lot more use of technology. Personally, in my life, I've been getting onto devices such as Pro Tools and software such as that, and really learning these things, as well as Ableton. And I know plenty of other people that are doing that. For people who are wondering, those are just music softwares. I don't know if anyone really knows what those are, but I definitely think that the I definitely think that technology is going to become much more of a part of what we do. And I think there's going to be some cool things that really come out of that. Of course, hoping we all open back up so we can play in a live setting, because there is an energy to that that's very distinct. I don't know for sure, but I think that technology will have more of a say in our lives, basically.
And Otto?
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I guess I'm a little bit more hopeful that people are going to be wanting to go back to the live events and want those experiences, only because it is different and only because it is a way to experience music that really just sounds different and sounds in a way that I think is my favorite way to hear music, and then kind of seeing people do it and kind of adapting to the situation. And those are always, the most magical moments for me of experiencing music is in a live setting. I love recording, but there's nothing like somebody doing in front of you and trying their best, and there's those magical moments. That being said, I think there have been some really interesting examples of jazz musicians overcoming the technological barriers. I've seen many venues go online and have these kind of concerts that incorporate musicians from all over in one place. So that's kind of one advantage, that you can kind of have more international or national collaboration of one person or multiple people. So that's something that's kind of exciting. And then I've seen something fun I think Angelo Lasmano is doing. I don't know if other musicians are doing, but he kind of does a comping of a chord or a comping of like one chorus and then has different people solo over it. And it's kind of a fun, really fast jam session. Everyone kind of interprets the same thing. And there's something very fun to me about that as well. And it's very entertaining. So there's some qualities of it that will probably last, and that are different actually than what can be done live.
Yeah.
May I actually say one more thing?
Sure.
Just to go off of what Otto was saying. I think that what's really important in jazz music that perhaps maybe is more emphasized is the idea of conversation. And I think in one way, when I was speaking on technology, is that the beautiful thing about technology is we can have musical conversations from different time zones all across the world. And I feel as though this is a huge revelation for a lot of people. Maybe they haven't seen that before in their lifetime. So in any case, I also agree with Otto, though. I really hope we get back into the live session. I'm very much hoping that.
Sure. Just like everyone else, that, although it is fun to some way to discovering many things online, but being there, smell something, while enjoying the music, and of course also enjoying the conversation with musicians, then it is something that's really important to have it live, And even though there's some technology that's being implemented, I do know there are virtual reality audio kind of setting that has been implemented, and we might gonna do and testing that as well in our upcoming mini festival that we're gonna create it with Ed America in a coming months. It's gonna be called Shawwal Jazz Festival to celebrate the Eid Mubarak with Ed America. So stay tuned for that information. I'm gonna read one last question. Unfortunately, there are many, and we don't have much time left. But I hope that this will give a good indication that the conversation, the endless conversation, may continue in the near future with another kind of talks and discussion like this, facilitating by the Ad America. Of course, we need to give a big round of applause for the Ad America for facilitating this conversation. So I would like to take one question is from, let's see. Okay, maybe just try to incorporate two questions into one. So Karima was appraising your work, Ari. So she was asking about what was your inspiration behind the works, and from Pak Dedi F. Rosiadi, he was asking about music as a culture in the U.S. Can we identify the social class from this jazz like music from the middle class? I don't know whether you could elaborate the questions. So yeah, both of you.
Oh, sure. Just to touch on my own work, I wrote. I really, first off, thank you. I really appreciate that a lot. That means quite a lot to me. I really wrote that album Fear Animated because in that time in my life, especially in America, there is a lot of let's say there's a lot of action going on in the world, right? So I wanted to kind of my last track, Truce, which is the one that you heard, was supposed to signify the idea of a release or sort of a coming together on things. And I feel that I was happy that that came out when it did before the pandemic, because I just wanted to kind of encapsulate that idea. Truce meaning, just everybody's cool with each other, basically. As far as the second question on, was it on classism or class and
yeah, it's about different classes.
I obviously it's a very deep subject that we could go into for a very long time, and everybody kind of has a different view on it. I feel that there is this idea of jazz sometimes as a high art music or something that is seen in the upper class, that's unfortunate to me in a way, because I feel as though it's always been a music of people, like I said, in the smaller settings of things, it's always been this music that the community came from all these cities and played music that was important to them socially and personally. So I think that as far as where the trajectory of that goes, I think it's up to you as the individual to decide what you're going to use your music for. And in my personal case, I am very much about community outreach, and I want to go to different communities and be a part of that and learn from that. Indonesia was a big part of that for me in the world community, and I'm very grateful for that. And I feel as though, as far as class goes, just being open to people and being open to their ideas is a very beautiful thing that we should always try to embrace. And I'm very fortunate in that way to get that opportunity. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Ari.
Yeah, and I'll respond to the second question about music in the U.S. And yeah, jazz has a very interesting history in that it started as a lower class tradition and then kind of taken up by the music industry and kind of elevated to popular culture and as a middle class activity, and also kind of in the later Ken Burns era of jazz actually becomes high class. And so it's kind of, we're actually at an interesting inflection point, because I think that actions that made it really high class and kind of this classical tradition are being critiqued, and that the institutionalization and just that there's one way to do jazz is being questioned. And so there's a lot of really nice initiatives by the same institutions to kind of bring jazz back to lower class communities, give them access to instruments. And so there has been this drive for more general education, and that jazz is for everyone and can be for everyone. It's that part of it's ongoing, and I guess a little bit hopeful for me. But we are kind of seeing, even in the U.S., jazz kind of being integrated with more R&B and hip hop, and kind of bring it back to what kids and young adults might be listening to again. I can think of like Kamasi Washington and Thundercat and kind of those kinds of players. So there is, it's a kind of a shift and an inflection point to see how it's going. So it's a really interesting question, but it's always been a style that kind of asks that. So it's always kind of interesting to see where your community feels about it at that time. So,
well, thank you very much, Otto and Ari, for your answer, thoughts, and ideas. And yeah, I think as jazz as broad subjects, it could always be an endless topic. It could be subject to discuss that if you want to go deep, it probably you have to really dig more. But at the same time, if you just want it to be like a light, seven sound, it could be just something, like a fresh air. So it really ups to you to decide how deep you want to go. And as far as the concern that what we has been discussing on tonight, jazz and Indonesian Encomium, there are commonality in both countries, Indonesia and United States of America, back to the tradition of jazz that you always have to dig your own tradition, both in the jazz vocabulary and also in our own tradition. And I think despite the pandemic situation, what we should always do is we adopt and we adapt. And I would say we, all of us here in the optimistic side. So we are looking forward so much for any future possible cooperation between two countries, especially people-to-people connection. And just want to closing this by saying thank you very much again for Ari and Otto to joining with us for your, especially in your considering your time right now in the States. But jazz is expecting the unexpected. So me, Agus Setiawan Basuni, thank you very much for joining us for tonight conversation. Hope to see you again sometime soon. Be safe, be healthy, and be optimistic. Thank you very much. Back to the at America.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Pa Agus, Mr. Otto, and also Mr. Ari. We all really had a great time here, so we hope to see you again next time. Now, the rest of you, please don't go anywhere, because I have the name of the winner for our social media quiz today. Earlier in this event, I asked you guys what city is considered to be the birthplace of jazz. And the correct answer is C, New Orleans. And our winner for today is at Mega Sophias from Instagram. Congratulations, Mega. As I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this event, At America is having a very special activities and we're giving out 5 folding bike. And how do you participate? You can participate by posting a picture of you doing your favorite eco-friendly activities at the hashtag PayEarthForward on the caption section and post it on your Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and simply tag our social media account at ATAmerica. For further information, you can visit bit.ly/PayEarthForward. Now, you may be wondering, how can I develop an awesome idea for a place like this? Easy. You can go to our website at www.atamerica.or.id, click Create an Event, and collaborate with us. All proposals coming to us will be reviewed, and your event might be featured here soon. And while you're on our website, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletters for weekly event updates sent straight to your inbox. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at ATAmerica for event updates, fun content, and so much more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Alright everybody, I think that wraps up this episode. It has been really fun, but unfortunately we have to say goodbye for now. Thank you so much everyone for tuning in. Have a good night.